sometimes the most painful chapters are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves. But every single one leaves us different than we were before. So as we approach episode 100, something that less than about 1% of podcasts globally ever reach, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you to every guest who had the courage to show up with an aim each episode to just help one person. It seeps into how we show up, how we react, how we love, how we lead in life. We all have an attic, a place where we store all the boxes we'd rather not open. Some of my guests have shared stories of finally opening those boxes. Walls come down, shame loses its grip, and someone listening realizes they're not alone. This is where I've been. This is what I've survived. We liberate ourselves. The act of speaking our truth is healing. It turns secrets into stories and pain into purpose. Welcome to episode 99 of Share Podcast. 99 and not out. As we look for a quick single to bring up triple figures next week, something that less than about 1% of podcasts globally ever reach, I wanted to use the last couple of episodes to reflect on the people, the stories, and sheer honor that I've had to chat with some incredible human beings who've trusted me to share their story. The highs, the lows, and everything in between. Diverse topics, themes, and guests, with an aim each episode to just help one person. From the very beginning, it was a simple idea that kept pulling me forward. When we share, we empower, not just ourselves, but each other. It sounds so straightforward, but what I've discovered through every conversation, every reflection, and every story is that it's one of the most powerful truths we have. So many people believe their story doesn't matter, or that it isn't big enough, unique enough, or important enough to share. But the moment someone sits down and opens up about the highs, the lows, the messy middle, something incredible happens. Walls come down, shame loses its grip, and someone listening realizes they're not alone. That's the power of owning your story, not editing it to look perfect, not hiding the struggles behind a polished highlight reel, but telling it as it really is. Over and over, my guests have proven that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's courage in its purest form. It's saying, this is where I've been, this is what I've survived, and this is what I've learned. And what I've learned is when we do that, when we share, three things happen. We liberate ourselves. The act of speaking our truth is healing. It turns secrets into stories and pain into purpose. We empower others. Someone out there is carrying the same burden, thinking they're the only one. Your story becomes their spark and permission slip to speak up, to heal, to hope. We build connection. Real connection isn't built on pretending. It's built on honesty, on saying, me too. In a world obsessed with image, sharing authentically is an act of quiet rebellion. It's choosing depth over appearance, substance over polish, and meaning over performance. If you've been listening to this podcast, if you've ever felt a spark of recognition when someone shared their journey, I hope you remember this. Your story matters. Your story has weight. Your story has the power to change someone else's. So as we approach episode 100, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you to every guest who had the courage to show up, to be vulnerable, and to trust this space with their truth. And thank you to you, the listener. Whether you've listened to one or every single one, thanks, Mum, having the opportunity to sit with the stories, reflections, and insights, I hope they've helped you as much as they've helped me. So in this week's episode, I wanted to take you through 10 lessons or things that I wanted to touch on, that I've learned that have impacted me. And if this is the first episode you've ever listened to of Share Podcast, then you've just fast-tracked yourself to hear what I think can be absorbed in action to shift your perspective, your point of view, and ultimately your life. Enjoy. Number 1, the power of environment. Show me your environment and I'll show you your future. When I look back across the episodes of Share Podcast and the 86 remarkable guests who've shared their stories, there's one theme I keep coming back to over and over again: environment. Not just the physical spaces we occupy, but the relationships we invest in, the culture we absorb, the stories we the habits and rhythms that surround us each and every day. Because here's the truth I've learned. Environment shapes us, often in ways we don't even realize until we step out of it. Some of my guests grew up in environments of chaos, drugs, violence, even poverty. Others came from structured, high-achieving households where expectations were sky high. Some found themselves in toxic workplaces that slowly drained their self-worth. And others surrounded themselves with people who inspired them to be better. Again and again, the same pattern emerged. Environment either fuels your growth or feeds your stagnation. I've learned that if you're trying to heal, create, or change your life, your environment isn't a nice to have. It's a multiplier. It can be the difference between staying stuck or finding momentum. When you plant a seed, you don't just hope it will grow. You tend to the soil, you give it light and water, you protect it from weeds and pests. The environment actually does most of the work. People are the same. Some of the most profound transformations I've witnessed came when someone changed where they spent their time, who they surrounded themselves with, and what they tolerated. They chose places where they felt safe to be vulnerable, places that supported the person they wanted to be, relationships that called them forward instead of dragging them down, routines that nurtured their energy, not just their productivity. That's when things shifted, not just outside, but also inside. So if there's one thing this podcast has taught me about environment, it's this. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can choose where you heal and who you heal with. You can choose to step out of rooms that diminish you and step into rooms that expand you. You can decide to create an environment internally and externally that aligns with the person that you want to become. As I sit here recording this episode, I'm reminded that Share has never been about the stories. It's about the spaces these stories create. Spaces of possibility, spaces of reflection, spaces where people can say, maybe I'm not alone in this. If you're listening today, maybe take a moment to ask yourself, what environments am I in that no longer serve me? Who are the people who energize me and who are those that deplete me? What small shifts in my environment could unlock something new in me and my life? Because in the end, your environment is either an anchor holding you back or a wind lifting you forward. Here's to choosing wisely. Number 2, when your brain tries to trick you. One of the most profound lessons I've learned, not just through my own life, but from so many conversations on this podcast, is this. Your brain doesn't always tell you the truth. It doesn't always have your best interests in mind. And sometimes, especially when you're struggling, your brain will serve up thoughts that feel real and convincing, but are actually steering you further away from the life you want. Think about it. When you're battling depression, your brain says, don't get up, stay in bed, don't shower, don't exercise, don't connect with anyone. It feels logical in the moment, like you're conserving energy or protecting yourself. But every time I've listened to that voice, I've sunk deeper. And every time I've done the opposite, got up, moved my body, connected, I've felt more human, more alive, and more myself. It's the same with something as simple as exercise. You wake up early and your brain whispers, just sleep another hour. You deserve it. It'll be okay. You need it. And sometimes, sure, rest is what you need. But more often than not, that extra hour leaves you feeling foggy, frustrated, and disconnected from your daily goals. Yet, when you get up and move, even when you don't feel like it, you feel proud, clear-headed, and energized. Or take, for instance, alcohol and food. Your brain says, have that drink, order that takeaway. You've had a long day. In the moment, it feels like comfort. But afterward, you actually feel worse. Regret, shame, a body that doesn't function the way you want it to. What I've learned through my own journey and from guests like Joel Ludwig, who spoke about rewiring beliefs and patterns, is that our brains are brilliant survival machines, but terrible guides for thriving. They're designed to keep us safe and comfortable, but not fulfilled. They look for short-term relief, not long-term reward. They cling to what's familiar, even if what's familiar is slowly destroying us. That's why it's so critical to learn to pause and ask, is this thought true? Is it helpful? Is it taking me closer to the life I want or further away? Because here's the paradox. The things we most resist are usually the things we most need. Getting out of bed, moving your body, connecting with others, eating food that nourishes you, choosing discipline over impulse. Joel talked about this beautifully, how we can learn to notice the stories our brain tells us and replace them with better questions. What do I need right now? Not what feels easiest. What will serve me tomorrow? Not just soothe me today. If you're listening today, I want you to know you're not alone in this. You're not broken because your mind plays these tricks on you. It's what human brains do. But you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of them. You get to choose whether you follow them or gently set them aside and do what you know is right for you in that moment. When in doubt, remember this. Short-term comfort often costs long-term peace. Short-term discomfort often unlocks long-term freedom. So the next time your brain says, don't get up, don't bother, don't try, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what would the future version of me thank me for doing right now? That's the voice to listen to. That's the path that leads to somewhere better. Number 3, unpacking the attic. One of the most transformative lessons I've learned through my own experience and through so many guests who've sat across from me on this podcast is this. We all have an attic, not a physical one, though some of us have those too, but an attic in our minds, a place where we store all the boxes we'd rather not open, the heartbreaks we never processed, the regrets we've tried to forget, the traumas we hoped time alone would heal. The parts of ourselves we've been too ashamed to face. At first, it feels easier to leave those boxes up there, to shove them in the corners, shut the door, and pretend they don't exist. We tell ourselves, if I don't look at it, it can't hurt me. But here's the truth I've learned in my journey. What we bury or hide doesn't die. It waits. It seeps into how we show up, how we react, how we love, how we lead in life. Some of my guests have shared stories of finally opening those boxes, sitting with their grief, their anger, their fear, their shame. And every single time the act of unpacking, even when it was painful, set them free. Because here's what happens when we finally walk up the stairs, turn on the light, and start sorting through what we've hidden away. We realize the monsters in the attic are often smaller than we feared. We see that the stories we told ourselves, I'm unlovable, I'm broken, I'm weak, I'm not enough, were just stories. We find courage we didn't know we had. And with every box we open, examine, and let go of, the attic gets lighter. We get lighter. We stop carrying the weight of unprocessed experiences into every new relationship and every new day. We start to live from a place of clarity instead of confusion, authenticity instead of avoidance. I've learned that ignoring the attic doesn't keep us safe. It keeps us stuck. It traps our energy in the past. And it's only when we do the work to unpack, sort, and heal that we reclaim the freedom to fully be ourselves. If you're listening to this, maybe you know exactly which box is waiting for you to open. Maybe it's the loss you've never spoken about, the resentment you've been carrying for years, the shame that keeps you small. I know it feels safer to leave it where it is. But I promise you this, every box you open takes you closer to peace. Every story you face loses its power to define you. Every moment of courage to unpack becomes an act of liberation. So today, I invite you to ask yourself, what's in my attic? What am I avoiding? What would it feel like to finally let go of it? Because in the end, freedom isn't about collecting more. It's about releasing what no longer serves you. Here's to opening the attic door. Here's to unpacking with compassion. Here's to creating space for the life you truly want to live. Number 4, beyond the labels. One of the biggest themes I've seen through my own life and in so many conversations with guests is how easily we can lose ourselves in the roles we play. When we're young, we absorb ideas about who we should be. From our parents, be good, make us proud. From our teachers, follow the rules, don't stand out too much. From our peers, fit in, don't be different. Then we grow up and it doesn't stop. We step into our jobs and our bosses tell us what success looks like. We scroll through social media and strangers tell us how we should look, feel, and live. We build careers, families, businesses, and before long, we're so tangled in other people's expectations that we can't hear our own voice anymore. We start to define ourselves by labels. I'm a parent, I'm a manager, I'm a provider, I'm the strong one, I'm the achiever. And while those titles can be meaningful, they can also become cages. Because here's what I've learned. When you spend too long living by other people's definitions, you wake up one day feeling like you're living someone else's life. You realize you're saying yes to things that drain you. You're trying to meet expectations you never agreed to. You're pleasing everyone, but the only person that really matters, yourself. And deep down, there's this quiet ache. Who am I, really, when no one is watching? I've heard this in so many of the stories that guests have shared. People who were celebrated for their titles, CEOs, managing directors, athletes, soldiers, entrepreneurs, managers, but inside felt empty because they'd abandoned their own needs and truth. You are not your titles. You are not your business card. You are not the expectations your family placed on you when you were too young to choose. You are something far deeper, more spacious, more real. The journey back to yourself often looks like stripping away what doesn't belong, saying no when you've been conditioned to say yes, letting go of labels that keep you small or stuck, choosing what feels authentic over what looks impressive. If you're listening today, maybe you feel that ache, that sense that you've lost sight of your own reflection under all the labels. And I want to remind you, it's never too late to remember who you truly are. It's never too late to define success on your own terms. It's never too late to choose yourself. Yes, you're a parent, a friend, a colleague, a leader, but those are things you do, not who you are. So today, I invite you to ask yourself, what expectations have I outgrown? What labels no longer feel true for me? If I stop trying to please everyone, what would I choose? Because at the end of the day, the most important title you'll ever hold isn't on your resume. It's the one you whisper to yourself when you finally come home to who you are. Here's to letting go of what isn't yours. Here's to reclaiming your own definition. Number 5, loving without conditions. This next reflection is one of the hardest I've had to learn, and it's something I see so many people wrestle with. What does it really mean to want the best for someone you love? At first glance, it sounds simple. We say, I want you to be happy. I want you to grow. I want you to become everything you're capable of. But what I've discovered is that when we say that, what we really mean, if we're honest, is I want you to grow, but please don't grow away from me. I want you to evolve, but stay in the version of the relationship that feels safe to me. That's the part we don't talk about. It's human. It's understandable, but it's still attachment. The deeper truth I've learned is this. If your love or friendship is truly unconditional, then you have to be willing to let people follow their own path, even when it doesn't include you in the way you'd hoped. That's what it means to love without ownership, to love without conditions. I've seen this in my own life. I've watched people I care about grow into new chapters that didn't involve me as closely. I've felt the sting of realizing that sometimes the healthiest thing I could do was step back, not hold on tighter. Because sometimes the best way to love someone is to give them the freedom to become who they are meant to be. And sometimes the best way to love yourself is to walk your own path, even if it means outgrowing people who once felt like home. That doesn't mean the connection didn't matter. It doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It just means you're both evolving, and that's okay. If a relationship or friendship is genuine, if it's built on respect and truth, then you can trust that you can both keep cheering each other on, even from different roads. You can keep holding space for each other's growth even when it feels uncomfortable. You can love each other without needing to control the outcome. It takes maturity to say, I love you enough to want the best for you, even if it's not me. It takes courage to say, I trust that the right connections will remain, not because we're clinging to them, but because they're meant to last. If you're listening and this is hitting close to home, maybe you're in that season right now, watching someone you love choose a different path. I know, it hurts. But I also know that letting people grow is one of the most selfless, authentic forms of love there is. So here's what I remind myself, and maybe it will help you too. You don't own anyone else's journey. Your worth isn't measured by who stays. Sometimes letting go is how you honor what you shared. If the connection is meant to endure, it will find a way to grow alongside you. If it doesn't diminish the love you had. Here's to loving without conditions. Here's to respecting each other's revolution. Here's to respecting each other's evolution. And here's to trusting that sometimes the greatest gift you can give and receive is the freedom to walk your own way. Number 6, there's lessons in everything. One of the biggest shifts in my life, and one I've heard echoed in countless conversations, is the idea that everything happens for a reason. Now, I know that can sound a little cliche, and I know it doesn't always feel comforting, especially when you're in the middle of pain, loss, or uncertainty. But over and over, I've seen how true it is. Every person who crosses our path, every unexpected setback, every fleeting moment of curiosity, they all carry something for us. A lesson, a message, a nudge to pay attention. Sometimes it's obvious. You meet someone who inspires you to change careers or start a business. You experience a loss that teaches you the fragility and the preciousness of time. You have a conversation that unlocks something you didn't know you were missing. Other times, it's subtle. You think of someone you haven't seen in years, and when you reach out, you discover there's something you both needed to share. You have a gut feeling to turn left instead of right, and that tiny choice changes the entire course of your day, maybe even your life. These are the sliding door moments, the 1-degree shifts that don't feel significant at the time, but that slowly, over months or years, set us on a completely different path. I often think about this metaphor. If you're steering a boat and your course is off by just 1 degree, you won't notice it at first, but over a long distance, you can end up being in an entirely different ocean. That's how it works with the decisions we make and the ones we don't. The opportunities we say yes to, the intuition we ignore or follow, the lessons we're willing or unwilling to learn. So when something happens, good or bad, I've learned to get curious around that. What is this here to teach me? What is this moment trying to show me? Is it drawing me towards something or away from something that no longer serves me? When I look back, it's clear that the hardest experiences were often the ones with the richest lessons. And the people I met by chance were often exactly who I needed, even if I didn't realize it at the time. Guests on this podcast have shared story after story that began with a single, seemingly insignificant moment. A passing comment that planted a seed, a setback that forced them to find their purpose, a moment of synchronicity that felt too perfect to be random. So if you're listening today, I'd invite you to consider, what if every event, every person, every challenge is part of something bigger? What if life is constantly giving you clues, messages and opportunities to grow, if you're willing to look beneath the surface? The next time you find yourself wondering, why is this happening? Try asking instead, what is this here to teach me? Because awareness of those 1-degree shifts doesn't help you understand your past. It empowers you to steer your future. Here's to staying curious. Here's to trusting that nothing is wasted. And here's to honoring the lessons in everything. Number 7, what we want versus what we need. There's a quote that really struck me a number of years ago from Gary Gorrow that says, you can never have enough of what you don't need. Let that quote sink in. Because when I look at my own life and at so many of the stories shared, I see how often we confuse what we want with what we actually need. We're taught from a young age that fulfillment comes from accumulation. More money, more achievements, more recognition, more stuff. The bigger house, the fancier car, the luxury holidays, the new watch, the next promotion. But here's the thing, there is always going to be more. And if you're chasing what you don't really need, no amount will ever feel like enough. I've seen this pattern play out again and again. People who have wealth beyond what most of us can imagine, who can buy anything they want, and yet they feel so empty, unfulfilled, disconnected, lonely. All the success and status in the world can't guarantee health, love, peace, or purpose. And no matter what we accumulate in life, we can't take it with us. Even more interesting when we take it to another level, when we leave too much behind for the next generation, it doesn't always help them. It can actually rob them of the chance to learn, grow, and build their own resilience. This gap between wanting and needing shows up everywhere. Like Mark Hodgson and Stephen DeMedio from Mind and Body Travel. When talking about holidays, they reflect that we take holidays thinking we want to see more, do more, cram in every experience, only to return home exhausted, unchanged, and needing another break to recover from the holiday. What we need is often simpler, quieter, and far more nourishing. Rest instead of striving. Connection instead of attention. Presence instead of proving. And yet the moments when I felt most alive were never about the stuff. They were about simplicity, time in nature, honest conversations and connection, doing what matters, serving, being fully present. What we want a lot of the time is about ego. What we need is about soul. So if you're listening to this, I invite you to pause and ask yourself, where in my life am I chasing something I don't actually need? What am I trying to fill? What would be enough if I was truly honest with myself? Because chasing what we don't need is like drinking salt water. It might feel like it quenches our thirst in the moment, but it only leaves us craving more. What we need is often simpler, quieter, and far more nourishing. Rest instead of striving, connection instead of attention, purpose instead of possessions, presence instead of proving. As we wrap this reflection, I want to leave with you that quote again. You can never have enough of what you don't need. When you really understand that, everything starts to shift. Number 8, self-care isn't selfish. Chelsea Pottinger said it perfectly. Self-care isn't selfish. Because we're taught to believe that it is. That taking time for yourself is indulgent, that saying no makes you less committed, that rest is something you earn after you've burned yourself out. But here's what I've learned from my own journey and that of so many of my guests who've walked this path. If you don't look after yourself, eventually you can't look after anyone else. Tom Cronin spoke about the power of meditation to create space and clarity in our minds. Danielle Richards shared her experience of burnout, the warning signs she ignored until her body forced her to stop. Ruth Kent reminded us how nature can heal us in ways nothing else can. Tim Jack Adams talked about the daily practice of checking in on yourself, asking, where is my battery level today? What do I need today to recharge it? Tom Panos reflected on the importance of health and fitness, not just for vanity, but to be ready when life throws challenges your way. Because none of us are immune, and as we age, those challenges will come. So why do many of us resist self-care? Part of it is the conditioning we carry, that our worth is measured by our productivity, that if we're not busy, we're falling behind, that everyone else's needs come before our own. But the truth is, if you keep running on empty, eventually your body, mind, and soul will send you a bill you can't ignore. We maintain our cars more religiously than we maintain ourselves. We schedule regular services, we check the tyres, we top up the oil, we listen for any strange noises. Yet within our own bodies, we ignore symptoms. We dismiss fatigue as normal. We settle for just getting by. If you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. Your health, physical, mental, emotional, is the single most important asset you have. Without it, nothing else matters. Without it, you can't be there for your family, your friends, your team, your purpose. So I want to remind you and myself of a few simple things. Schedule that annual checkup with your GP. Don't ignore symptoms or write them off as just getting older. Move your body even when you don't feel like it. Rest, not just when you've earned it, but because you need it. Check in with your own mind and your emotions because stress doesn't disappear on its own. Self-care doesn't have to be grand gestures. Sometimes it's as simple as 10 minutes of stillness, a walk outside, drinking more water, saying no without guilt, choosing sleep over doom scrolling, choosing sleep over doom scrolling on social media. Because in the end, you can't show up for the people who need you if you're running on fumes. You can't live life on your terms if you've neglected the one vehicle that will carry you through it: your body, your mind, and your soul. So here's to a new standard from today. One where self-care isn't an afterthought. One where we value ourselves to make it a priority. And one where we remember, you are worth the effort, you are worth the time, you are worth the care. If there's one truth that's come up in many conversations, it is you can't pour from an empty cup. It sounds simple, but living it, that's the hard part. Number 9, success. If you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you'll know there are 2 questions I ask of each and every guest. The first one is, what does success mean to you and how has it changed through your life? I love this question because it opens a door to see who someone is beneath the resume, the achievements, and the titles. When I look back at all the answers to this question, one theme stands out. Almost nobody defined success the way the world teaches us to. Early on, many guests talked about success as hitting goals, climbing ladders, achieving recognition, proving themselves to others. But over time, often after hardship, loss, burnout, those definitions changed. Success started to look like freedom over status, health over hustle, time with family over trophies on the wall, peace of mind over the next big win. Some guests shared that losing everything they thought mattered was the moment they finally discovered what really did. Others said they had to achieve everything on their list before they realized none of it could fill the gap inside. What struck me was how universal this evolution was. No matter how different their backgrounds, every person eventually learned that success isn't about what you have. It's about who you are and how you live. So if you're listening, I'd encourage you to ask yourself a question. What does success mean to me? And is it actually my definition or someone else's? Because one thing I've learned after all these stories is that success that costs you your health, your peace, or your relationships isn't really success. Maybe success is simpler and deeper than we've been taught. Living with integrity, contributing something meaningful, being fully present with the people we love, waking up excited about who you are becoming. Here's to redefining success on your own terms and giving yourself permission to letting that definition evolve as you do. Number 10, who's been your greatest teacher in life? What I love about this question is how it always reveals the heart of the person sitting opposite me. Some guests named mentors or coaches. Some spoke about a parent or a grandparent. Others shared stories of partners, friends, colleagues, children, even strangers whose words changed their lives. But the most powerful answers weren't always about who supported them. Many said their greatest teacher was failure, grief, illness, betrayal. It's a reminder that sometimes the most painful chapters are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves. What I've noticed is that the greatest teachers all had one thing in common. They held up a mirror. They reflected back to my guests who they were and who they could become. They challenged them to grow, to let go, to step up, or to change. Hearing all these stories has reminded me that teachers are everywhere, if we're willing to see them. They don't always arrive in the form we expect. Sometimes they come as mentors, sometimes as adversaries, sometimes as moments of heartbreak or loss. But every single one leaves us different than we were before. So as you reflect on your own life, maybe ask yourself, who has been my greatest teacher? What did they teach me and how has it molded me into the person I am today? How did they help shape the path I'm on? And if you haven't told them, maybe this is your invitation to do so. Because acknowledging our teachers, especially the ones we learned from the hard way, is part of honouring our journey. Here's to the mentors who believed in us, the challenges that refined us, and the experiences that taught us more than a classroom ever could. And here's to staying open to the teachers we haven't yet met. Thanks for listening to this week's episode 99. Next week, in episode 100, I dive into a reflection from each of the 86 remarkable guests that I've had on the podcast. And I touch on a couple of questions after each reflection of each guest to make you think a little bit deeper into your own story, to find the power in your story, and to help you move from where you are today to where you can be tomorrow.